logged on, but we expect them momentarily. And I will just go into the land acknowledgement, and then we'll talk about roll call from CEO Morris. So as you know, we started this land acknowledgement about a few weeks ago, and it's my honor to read tonight's. On November 8th, we acknowledge the sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located, has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Thank you so much. CEO Morris, could you just remind us the town staff who are on the meeting tonight?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. We have a broad spectrum of items on tonight's agenda, so consequently we have a number of staff from across the organization. So we have Director McMunn is here with us, Director Manhire, Director Costello, our Manager of ECDev and Tourism, Julia Crowder, is here with us. We have Fire Chief Cheeseborough and our Senior Planner, Carl Grenke. And of course, our Deputy Clerk, Nadine Bennett, is with us.
Thank you very much. And I see Councillor McGuire is now joined us. So we have a full slate of council tonight. Are there any amendments to this evening's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move ahead. Any disclosure of monetary interest in relation to that agenda? And I'm seeing none, so we'll move ahead. Adoption of the minutes. There's a recommended motion that the minutes of the October 12th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting be received and filed. We have a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor Allen. All in favor? That motion's carried. Thank you. And we have two pieces of correspondence. One letter from the city of Sarnia, who is concerned and is seeking our council's support. They're concerned with a practice they refer to as renoviction, where landlords will evict a tenant in order to renovate the apartment or house. And the city of Sarnia and some municipalities feel that this is that I won't call it a loophole, that option for landlords is being misused by some, and are encouraging the provincial government to take steps to get that under control. So I'm looking to my council colleagues to see if they would, how they would like to deal with that. So Mayor Panko, would you like to go ahead, please?
Sure. Obviously, this is an issue that does concern us, and unfortunately, we hear of our citizens who are facing evictions based on this. I guess I'll say tactic. While it's justified in some cases, it's not always justified. What I would suggest is that we send this to our Housing Advisory Committee, which is meeting Wednesday this week, for I guess discussion and potentially I guess wording for a resolution, and have that come back to committee of the whole, hopefully next week or the week after. Okay.
And any other comments on this, or is that appropriate? Everybody's happy with that? And all right, then it's council's wish to do that, and that'll be brought forward at a future meeting. I'm off to a really good start tonight. I missed item number 6, which is the CEO and directors reports. No offense intended, and I'm sure none taken, CEO Morris. So please, if you have some directors reports, walk us through them.
Yes, we have 3 this evening, and I would suggest we start with Chief Cheeseborough.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our Municipal Emergency Control Group met last Thursday. Unfortunately, representatives from the health unit were unable to attend. We reviewed the current statistics. 94% of residents have received their second dose of the vaccine. 97% have received their first dose. At that time, we currently had 9 active cases, and certainly that number seems to go up and down daily. The health unit is reporting our region now has the lowest active case count within the health units in Ontario. We have 1 currently in hospital. Total case count to date is 1,943 total cases with 63 deaths. Ontario reported they had 10,000 active cases as of last Thursday. The total case count for Ontario has just bridged the 600,000 mark with 9,886 deaths. Canada has reached a milestone of just over 1.73 million total cases and 29,000 deaths across Canada. The health unit is continuing on with the vaccination clinics. There will be 4 rotating clinics within our region. Smith Falls clinics are continuing to be held at the community center. The vaccination policy, the town's draft vaccination policy is scheduled to be heard tonight for further discussion. The town's draft policy was formed from the City of Ottawa's policy, which prescribes leave and termination for staff who choose to remain unvaccinated without a medical exemption. The province of Ontario announced last week, I should say, they would not be mandating vaccinations for healthcare sector. This follows the decision that was made in Quebec as well as BC. Kingston has experienced an increase in cases with 85 active cases, a number of those within the school board. The staff are continuing to monitor other municipal vaccination policies. We did have a discussion regarding the current state of emergency and the current position that we're in and how this would impact the virtual meetings and other community activities. You can expect the bylaw amendment coming forward once a decision has been made on that. A report will be presented to the committee of whole on November 22nd with regards to options with respect to continuing with the virtual meetings outside a state of emergency. The state of emergency will continue to remain in place and will be reassessed in the next 2 to 3 weeks. The Emergency Control Group further put out a message to remind all staff about the continued health protocols which need to be followed. Will be drafted and circulated to the staff this week. That is my update for this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from my colleagues? Okay, thank you. Our next director's report, Mr. Morris.
Yes, from Director Costello.
Thank you. I have one quick update this evening. The Planning Advisory Committee is hosting a virtual public meeting on November 18th at 5 p.m. to consider an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to accommodate additional residential units in accordance with the Planning Act. These changes apply to the entire geographic area of Smiths Falls. The official plan amendment proposes to establish enabling policies to allow additional residential units. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes new definitions and new provisions to regulate the permitted locations, minimum parking requirements, and yard setbacks for establishing additional residential units secondary to the main dwelling. Anybody who's interested in attending this virtual meeting is encouraged to contact Carl Grenke, and he can provide the Zoom details for participation.
Thank you, Director Costello. Is that the only way to get the information is to contact Mr. Grenke, or is it also on the town's website?
It will be live streamed and it'll be on the town's website, but anybody wishing to participate in the discussion will need the login details.
Good, thank you. Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, we'll move right along to the next report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to talk a little bit about a multi-party agreement that we've been working on. We have several intermunicipal service agreements in place with our neighbors. Arguably one of the most profound and far-reaching is the the cost sharing agreement for recreation services, in specifically access to the arena facility. We're in the final 2 months of the existing agreement. It was a 5-year arrangement. And I think by all accounts, it's worked very well. So knowing the expiration date was approaching, the mayor and I orchestrated meetings with our neighbors, 5 municipal neighbors, back in late spring. We've had discussions, very productive discussions through the spring and summer. And we're at a point now where we have a draft agreement. It's not considerably different than the existing one. The one fundamental change that I would point out is that the cost sharing model is based on an approach called a weighted assessment model. So it distributes costs based on assessment of the participating municipalities and assessment within the catchment area of the arena. So without getting too detailed, we had a formula that our auditor, Howard Allen, had helped us formulate back in 2015. At that point, it was based on assessment data at the time, of course. So things have changed, not as much as we had hoped. As we know, MPAC has yet to update the next 4-year cycle, but the group felt it was important to at least represent current assessment figures that we're using for taxation purposes. So we've gone through that exercise. It resulted in what I would describe as a marginal adjustment to the percentages. But in the end, the heads of council and CAOs and administrators agreed with the approach. So we have the draft agreement. I'm bringing it up this evening because our partners are one by one taking it to their councils and committees for endorsement. It's Drummond North Elmsley are considering it tomorrow evening, Montague next week. In fact, the mayor and I are attending as a delegation to explain the model and the agreement and help facilitate a decision. And Elizabethtown Kitley's the week after, Rideau Lakes as well. The one that hasn't been scheduled yet is Merrickville Wolford, but we hope by the end of the month, their committee will have considered the new agreement as well. So all that's to say, once our partners are comfortable with it, then we'll bring it back to this council for a decision on your part to enter the agreement. And it would start January 1st, 2022. And it will be, as proposed, a 5-year agreement. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Comments or questions? If I seeing none, I'll just jump in with one. We do expect the updated impact assessments in the next year. Is there a provision in there that when they come about that would be looked at again, or do we have to wait the 5 years to reopen it?
Great question, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have made provisions in the agreement to update it when MPAC releases their next 4-year cycle. I would point out that last week's autumn economic statement had confirmed that MPAC will not update assessment figures till 2023. Okay. So unfortunately, we have more time to wait, but your question is good. And yes, we have made provisions when that eventually happens.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions on this topic, is that the end of the reports tonight?
That's it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second, going back to correspondence item, our second correspondent is the letter from a local optometrist. As many of the viewers know, and council certainly knows, the optometrists have been withholding eye examinations that are provincially funded and withholding those services since I think September 1st. And they're looking to see, according to their letter, at least 20 other municipalities in Ontario are encouraging the provincial government to sit down with the optometrists and work this out. I know many people are anxious to get those eye exams and are having to wait. How would my colleagues like to handle this? Should we refer it for a discussion at a future COW, or do we want to, Councillor Brennan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I think we should have the next Cal meeting, have a talk about it. And, you know, I think the situation is probably fluid right now. And, but, you know, on the surface of what the local optometrists have said, I'm inclined to support a resolution, but I think we should talk about it at the next Cal.
I'm seeing a couple of nodding heads. Any thumbs up out there for bringing this forward? Okay, that's the decision of Cal tonight, is to move this request on to a future Cal for consideration. Thank you. There are no in-camera issues. So moving on to 8.1, vaccination policy. As you know, we did have a discussion and made a decision a week or so ago. And then last week it was requested that we take one more moment or two to consider that decision. And so I'll turn to Councillor Alford, as you were the one who requested this, one more discussion on this. Would you like to open this with some comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I requested that it come off the council agenda before it be and sent back to committee for a little more discussion on this, because while I think the policy that was crafted by staff and they did the appropriate consultations with all the appropriate agencies, and I do agree with requiring proof of vaccination for all future hires. But well, in the week between the committee of the whole and council, I came across something that struck me, and it was that someone said, and it's true, the true test of a democracy is how it treats its minorities. And in Lanark, in our county and in our town, those who remain unvaccinated without a medical or human rights exemption are the minority. And let me first be clear too. I meant everything I said at the committee of the whole. And if we can't find a viable solution from an operational perspective for this minority, we may have no alternative but to proceed with the option one of the report that was presented to us by council or by staff. But I did want to take a pause, because the full-time people who could potentially be deprived of their livelihood, in my opinion, deserve a little more discussion. And we've obviously made more time to process and discuss something like an active transportation plan, and I didn't feel that we had spent as much time as we potentially could have. And so for the past 2 years, our full-time staff have been in the trenches delivering services to our town that our townspeople expect, and they've performed in spite of COVID without hardly missing a beat. They have, like the rest of us, dealt with the fear and certainly in their personal lives, and many of them are working or worked in essential services. Some of our employees have been subjected to abuse by members of the public with unreasonable expectations of how you operate a municipality, and who couldn't either keep a civil tongue in their heads. I feel some obligation to our current full-time employees to ensure that we have considered every option to finding a way to keep them employed, while giving equal consideration to those employees and the public who are vaccinated. We're between a rock and a hard place, and this is really our last opportunity to consider any creative or innovative methods by which to satisfy both ends of this spectrum. So it's really a Hail Mary, and I thought we should come back to it.
Thank you. I'm not interested in rehashing the total argument, or no, sorry, discussion we had the previous time. So are there any new thoughts following on Councillor Alford that didn't get expressed the last time we had the discussion? It is difficult. I understand that. Mayor Panko?
Yes, and as you mentioned, it's difficult, and we are all struggling with this. But in the past 2 weeks, we've also seen other municipalities discuss or bring into place vaccination policies, and they vary, and there's quite a variance from one to the other. And so I think it's what may have been more commonplace even 2 weeks ago has differed since then. And of course, the province coming out and backtracking on mandatory vaccination for healthcare workers is also a profound change from where they were before. And I mentioned I fully respect our need to protect our employees. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, if we can find a way to accommodate to some extent. And we've also heard from some employees, some staff over the last couple of weeks. And the one thing that becomes evident to me through the last couple of weeks especially, is that even though there may be very limited medical exemptions, according to the province, that doesn't discount the potential impact fear of a vaccination has, legitimate fear has on an individual who has complicated health or complicated family health that they fear could impact, that the vaccination could impact their own health. And whether that is considered legitimate or not at the provincial level or even at the medical level, the reality is if someone is so fearful of the potential outcome of vaccination, whether we justify it or a doctor justifies it or not, the reality is if they're prepared to potentially lose their job and livelihood over this fear, it's very real to them, it's very legitimate. And when we do have options in front of us, including the rapid antigen test, which would provide a degree of safety. So the other it suggested 3 days a week. The other suggestion I would have, if committee would be comfortable with it, it would be a further stretch, would be that any member of our staff who is not fully vaccinated, if we retain them as employees, or if they stay on as employees, have a rapid antigen test prior to each shift. And so that does create a little bit more cost and burden on the employee, but it also elevates, I would suggest, the level of confidence that we are not, that we are doing a good job of trying to keep COVID out of the workplace.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rehash this, as you said, Mr. Chair, but I will just say that it is a difficult discussion and decision. However, as elected officials, it is our responsibility to make the decision. And in my view, we as a council have a duty of care. We have a duty of care for ourselves, for the exemplary public servants that serve our public, and to the public. And so that being said, I'm not going to change my opinion in that people need to get vaccinated. And you know, there was another option put forward today, which I can live with, which is a unpaid leave for a period of time, I think until February, and then you need to make a decision about whether you're going to work for us, because our people are working with the public. The COVID-19 is not going away, as we saw yesterday and today. It's in the schools now here. It's going to be a way of life. And, you know, I firmly believe that going forward, this is going to be, it is a once in a lifetime pandemic. We're going to need this for many, many years, maybe for the rest of our lives, just like polio. So I think that we have to pay attention to the duty of care that we've been entrusted by the taxpayers and by the people of this town. So the new option is that was put forward today, which is I think a unpaid leave for a matter of time, and after that, then you can't serve the public. And going forward too, the new hires that we have, people that want to work here and work with the public, need to be vaccinated. And I know it's not a, I don't know if my colleagues agree with that, but that's certainly my firm belief. And it's really a moral conviction. So that's it.
Okay.
That's all I got.
You. Yeah. Any other comments? I'll just ask a question to our police services board representatives, Mayor Panko and Councillor McGuire. Does this policy in place at the police services as well as they are town employees? Has it been discussed at the police services board? Please go ahead.
Yes, it was discussed at our last police service board meeting, and we were advised that all members of our police service are fully vaccinated.
So the same policy applies to the police services?
Well, there was no policy. I guess it was determined, I guess there's no need for policy, to my understanding. Councilor McGuire, correct me if I'm wrong, but because all members are fully vaccinated now. I think expectation to believe that all future members would also be vaccinated.
Okay, thank you. I remain, along with Councillor Brennan, convinced it's a difficult decision, but I remain convinced that the decision council made a week or so ago is the correct one. So I'm going to ask for a straw vote to see if you're still supporting the decision that we. Oh, Mr. Morris, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to point out several members of council have their virtual hands raised. And
Oh, I apologize. I can't see that here. So thank you. I did see, okay, Councillor Allen, then Councillor Dwyer, please go ahead. And Councillor McGuire.
Thank you. I support the same thing I did initially. I don't feel differently other than like Councillor Brennan, I could live with the suggestion today. I think it's fair. It might give people who are, worrying or trying to figure out what they want to do another month to figure that out. But like Councillor Brennan, I don't feel, as much as I'm very, very sad for the people who are struggling with this, I was elected to do a job for all of the citizens of Smiths Falls. And I really feel the majority of them feel the same way I do, that we need to all be vaccinated to protect ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to address the suggestion that staff made to introduce option 5 for consideration, which is to prolong the period in which our employees would be eligible to get vaccinated. Otherwise, they would be terminated. I am not in favor of that. My opinion stands based on the comments that I made at the last meeting. And I would not support any option that's tabled that results in termination of an employee due to their choice at this point. So I won't rehash, but I do think that if you're going to call a straw vote, just to be clear, there are now 5 options on the table, which I don't think all of our members have spoken to tonight.
Yeah, the option is to reinforce the decision council made or commit to that we made a week ago with this added month buffer is what I'd be asking people to comment or straw vote on. So Councillor McGuire, you had your hand up virtually.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. For me, the municipality is a creature of the province, and the province has decided that mandatory vaccination isn't required for healthcare workers. And I'm not a medical professional. I trust Dr. Kieran Moore's leadership and guidance on this. And if that's what the province thinks is prudent at this time, I don't think that we have an obligation or even a responsibility to go further than the province. I don't believe many of the services we provide are not as critical as healthcare. The exception for me is the CDC, where we've got young kids that are not eligible for a vaccine, and I'd like to see some kind of special language around the CDC and first responders and anyone else that is going to have to be less than 2 meters from the public, depending on the situation of their employment. But at this time, I still support option 3. I think it's the reasonable choice with the extensive testing.
Thank you. And for those listening, the CDC is the Child Development Center or the Child Care Center in Smiths Falls. So we have 3 folks who would like to maintain the original decision with the added feature of a 1-month grace period for the month of January, where people are off on unpaid leave while they reflect on whether or not they wish to get vaccinated. And I have 2 firm, no, don't do this if it results in any loss of employment. And Mayor Panko is trying to find the compromise again. And Councillor Alford, not to put any pressure on you, have you made a decision, because we need to move along on this discussion?
Much as it pains me, Mr. Chair, I will have to live with option 5.
So it's the decision that the majority council made previously with the 1-month buffer. The 1 month, I call it a buffer. I'm not sure what it's called, but a grace period. So that's 4. But Councillor McGuire, one more comment, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking for clarification from staff, because my understanding is option 5 is more harsh than the original option 1 that was agreed to, where option 1, they could go on indefinite unpaid leave. Now there's a date and a termination date that's being put forward by council. So I just want to confirm that we're ratcheting up the language here.
CA Morris or Director Costello, would you like to just comment on that?
I would refer that to the author of the report, Director Costello.
Okay.
Thank you. We have received legal, and there are some, with option number 5, there are some operational things that staff will have to work out. However, the leaves would still be, that they would still have to be available. There's different, the policy will have to be reworked to accommodate option number 5, as it's not the one that was presented, but the leaves still do come into play, Councillor McGuire. So once we get direction this evening, we'll have to go back and revamp the policy to include the leaves as well as to include the timelines, because they all do get pushed forward.
So, yes, Mr. Morris.
Yeah, so to augment that answer, their option 1 did not include an unpaid leave, either an undetermined length of time or a determined length of time. It did not include a leave. It was termination after the period, which would go till December 31st. Option 5 takes that same philosophy and simply adds a 1-month unpaid leave. And I would note that we didn't entertain an undetermined length of leave, because it's very difficult to manage, especially in a smaller organization. If someone were off for an undetermined amount of time, it's very difficult to backfill that role. You can't replace the person, so it becomes difficult to manage. So that's why we didn't offer an open-ended leave of absence. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Dwyer, you had a question?
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question for CAO Morris through you, Mr. Chair. Malcolm, what are the implications of extending the leave into January? Does that not now mean that our staff would qualify for their vacation attributed to 2022 on short-term medical leave, would they not similarly be eligible to restart their short-term leave commencing in the new year? I'm just not sure what the implications of extending this would be.
If I can, through the chair. So you're right, there would be a reset of earned time that could be used, but we're going on the assumption that people have exhausted their earned time and that they would be on their own time for that period of reflection. We could alter it to enable staff to use earned time as well. I'm kind of speaking on behalf of Director Costello, but I think we could work out the details on that option as well.
Okay, Councillor McGuire, and then we'll get back to the agenda.
So I'm very confused now because on page 3 of the vaccination policy, it says any applicable party without an approved accommodation under the Human Rights Code or medical exemption and not fully vaccinated against the hazard of COVID-19 by December 31st, 2021, in accordance with the implementation requirements of this policy, may elect to request a leave as per the town's employment bylaw. If no leave is requested or once all applicable leave provisions have been exhausted, the party's employment will be considered terminated. So under the employment bylaw, unpaid leave is in there. I don't see any time restrictions on the unpaid leave. I don't understand how that option 5 is more accommodating than option 1.
Director Costello, do you want to comment on that?
Without having the employment bylaw in front of me, unpaid leave would have to be approved. In this case, it's in the policy. So if a staff member exhausts any other leaves under the employment bylaw or under the ESA, the Employment Standards Act, it would automatically almost be seen as a pre-approval for a 1-month unpaid leave. In the employment bylaw, I believe there has to be approval from the CAO or director in charge of that department.
Okay. All right, I'm ready to, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, sorry, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
I just want some assurances when this is going to come forward to council. We need to give our public service some surety about what's happening here. And I don't want to delay it too much longer. I know that there's some adjustments to be made in the policy, but sooner rather than later.
I can see no reason why it couldn't come forward, but I'll turn to staff, not tonight, but perhaps at the next council meeting. Is there any reason, CEO Morris?
Yes, the earliest that could be brought forward would be next week at the regular meeting of council.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillor McGuire, you had your hand up, and I'll certainly go back one more time, and then we need to move on. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable bringing this to council when the wording, there's still a lot of wording that needs to be figured out. And for us to pass a policy without approving the policy as written at committee of the whole, it seems like a jumble of how we usually do business. So I think we need to have this come up, the updated vaccination policy come up at a future COW as a report, and then we can approve that, and then that can go to council. But to say that we're going to send a policy that doesn't even exist tonight to council, I'm very uncomfortable with that, and we'll be voting against it.
Yeah, I didn't hear that the policy doesn't exist. I think what I heard is there would be an adjustment or clarification to add that feature to it. So the policies are there, and they'll be applied with the direction that council gives tonight. And what I have is 4 votes to 3 in favor of the original decision council made, as well as this 1-month buffer into the end of January. So I thank you all. And again, this is not a pleasant, but this is our job, as Councillor Brennan has pointed out. Thank you. 8.2 is the appointment of the building inspector report. Director Costello, I believe that's you.
Thank you. This is a quick housekeeping item. As all of you know, we hired Jonathan Prue this summer to fulfill our building inspector plans examiner role. He has been doing so now for some months under the mentorship of Dave Sutherland, as well as the mentorship of the CBO in Merrickville-Wolford. So at this point, we are prepared to bring forward a bylaw to officially appoint him as a building inspector for the town of Smith Falls.
Comments or question? Thumbs up, everyone. That's good. Thank you, Director Costello. The Committee of the Whole agrees with that report. And 8.3 is the retail market study. Ms. Crowder, I believe you're going to speak to that.
Good evening. Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. The report before you is an information item to provide council with an update on the retail market analysis and report on the findings. So the report was created within 2001. In April, we retained Urban Metrics to complete the retail analysis. Data was collected between May and August. And the report was drafted and sent to staff for review in September, and then October it was finalized. So the report provides the town and business developer partners and stakeholders a foundation for retail sector data, a baseline to measure economic recovery efforts through the pandemic and after the pandemic, and advice as to whether the town's official plan and zoning bylaws and policies should be updated. So there's a lot of information within the report, but to summarize, some key takeaways and recommendations within the report is that the town of Smith Falls is a commercial hub for surrounding rural communities. It's anticipated that Smith Falls and Lanark County will continue to see population growth over the next 10 years, which will create more demand for more diverse retail offerings. Smith Falls has an abundance of commercial buildings and land to accommodate future retail growth, which means we don't need to look necessarily to create any more commercial. Investment attraction efforts should be focused really around clothing, home decor, home furnishings, full service dining, and specialty retail offerings. And that was data that was collected through various sources, including resident consultations and visitor consultations. More emphasis should be put on the retail shopping experience, especially in the downtown core and along the waterfront, to attract and keep consumers coming to town and to attract new people to town. The implement of new retail models to accommodate and encourage product and service diversity, pop-up retail, open air markets, and reimagining the traditional shopping mall, which I think we're already seeing within our town now. And then to update current zoning and official plan policies as outlined to support sustainable growth in each of our individual 4 commercial nodes. And we know that's downtown, Settlers Ridge, Brockville Broadview Plaza, and the Lombard Street corridor. So what staff has done is we've taken this report and we've actually provided it to WSP planning consultants, and they're taking the recommendations within that report to help update the zoning bylaw that's currently going on. So I'm happy to take any questions if Cal has any.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I did enjoy reading the retail analysis report, and it confirmed many of the things that were voiced in some webinars that I attended about the arrival at the inevitable in terms of our downtown and making that more experiential, and that is how in the future downtowns will compete with highway commercial. Even Walmart, and this was one of the anecdotes they gave during that, even Walmart, who spends considerably more money than most municipalities would on retail analysis, are going to start shifting their stores to have cafes and make it more experiential for people. So as the facilitators of those webinars were saying, pay attention to what somebody like a Walmart does, because now they are thinking they won't in the future be able to compete with downtowns unless they change. So I certainly suggest that webinar to anybody who's interested about what the future of our downtown in particular should be, and I felt that the retail analysis reflected those thoughts. So thank you, Julia.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire, I see your hand up? No?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Julia. It's I know this was one that kind of was started before you arrived, but for spending what we spent on this, I don't see anything in here that we didn't already get in previous plans and studies, and I'm getting tired of spending money on these plans and studies without new information to come forward. I think we knew there's growth on Highway 15. We know that that's where a lot of stuff's happening. We know there's empty space in the downtown. But I don't know how this is going to help facilitate a review of the CIP, or really what we can take away from this that justifies spending $20,000. I hope that it's useful in the zoning process, but just taking the time to read it this weekend, it was disappointing that there's nothing in here that really brings new ideas to the table. So I'm hoping, and that's not, you know, this has been in I think since March. So so anyway, those are my comments. Thanks.
Julia, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor McGuire. I think we know anecdotally a lot of this information that was captured within the report, but I think it's great to have an outside perspective kind of compile the data and put it in a report that can be understood. I think, again, some of the key takeaways is that we have an abundance of commercial, which means we don't need to invest in commercial. So that's really what's helping to inform our zoning and official plan policies moving forward. And I think it really opens up the opportunity to look at residential and mixed use commercial nods instead of strictly commercial. And I think that's really supportive of what the town of Smith Falls wants to do, especially on the affordable housing side. We can look at rezoning some commercial areas to accommodate residential development in the future.
Yeah, that's great. I guess the big one for me with the data is they use a growth projection of 0.8%. They didn't base it on our building permits issued. They didn't base it on the number of units that are coming online or projected to come online in the next 5 years. And I don't know if 0.8% is reasonable or not, just because that's what Lanark County had. And the census data they use is from 2016. So it's that kind of stuff where it's just, is this already out of date? Because the data that was used, some of the data that was used is 5 years out of date. But yeah, those are great points.
Thank you. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, thanks, Julia. And I found it informative. And I think to Councillor McGuire's point, some of it's stuff we may have known, but I think the context is different. And putting it all together in one report is helpful. I guess, Julia, the question, I guess, to you would be, what's your plan going forward? We have the commercial strategy towards the end of the report and a number of, I guess, actionable items. And am I correct in assuming there'd be a work plan to help follow through with this, or how do you ultimately attract the retailers and the entrepreneurs to fulfill the gaps in our retail strategy and offerings?
For you, Mr. Chair. So you're right, it is part of the work plan and moving forward in our marketing and advertising initiatives that we'd be looking to do in 2022. So it's really an investment attraction piece. And how we do that in economic development, there's a number of ways. Some of it is organic, some of it is very targeted. You know, we have to put investment attraction packages together, send it out to specific sectors and subsectors and retail operators that we may want to attract. We can use this to provide to our local commercial developers. So when they're looking at who they're going to look for tenants within their commercial developments, we can give them an idea based on this information of what the community is looking for. And they can look at doing some of that investment attraction for the town as well, because they don't want to put in commercial leaseholders that aren't going to be viable within their commercial developments. So those are just a few different ways that we can look to support that investment attraction effort.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've received this as information. Is there any other comments you would want to? Okay, thank you very much, Julie Crowder. We appreciate that. And we're going to move right along to the procurement of a fob system. And for those listening, the fob is just a keyless entry mechanism, so you can actually open doors without turning keys, and you know who's going through those doors at any given time. It collects a lot of data. So the report is over to you, Mr. Manhire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So great explanation of what the purchase is. We're looking to do this at the community center where we have a fair number of different access points. It is a system that we have in the town hall currently. And just as a kind of background piece, we did go out to tender with this. We had 2 packages picked up and no bids returned. So what we did is we went back to the supplier from the town hall project to get a price from them, and that's what we're working from currently. So the recommendation coming out of this, and I see that the package that is actually on the council agenda, unfortunately, I believe is with the incorrect recommendation. So the recommendation that we're looking for here is under option 1, which is the council approved that we work with the supplier to remove the components, because the bid that we did receive was for $58,000 for all of the systems in both the arena as well as the youth arena. And that we have a $50,000 envelope from the capital budget that we are working with. And so we are looking to potentially go back to the supplier and work that down to fit in the funding envelope available to us.
Okay. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Director Manhire. I'm trying to understand, or I need to understand better why sole sourcing this one. Like, I think I've got 3 or 4 different kinds of fobs on my dresser, and these systems seem to be widely used, widely adopted. So what is it about our system that there's only one supplier? And then option 2, I don't understand if maybe that one's not, is option 2 off the table, or that's the second question.
Mr. Chair, nothing is off the table. Council can give direction as they see fit. The fob system is not necessarily a sole source from one supplier. It is the supplier that supplied the units for town hall, and we could not identify another supplier of this system. And in terms of the system, the advantage here is that staff administer this system for entry for town hall as well as for the arena. And it just makes it easier to have one system and one fob controller piece to do that with, so that we're basically dealing with a universal system as opposed to a number of different systems.
Okay, so when option 2 is include the project as part of the scope for the town hall phase 3 renovation, a different supplier could supply the same product. I don't understand how, if it's already installed at the town hall, how it could be looped into phase 3.
So phase 3 will include the fob system, Mr. Chair, that is included in the second phase of town hall. So it will be part of the tender package that goes out. And what we would do is add an addendum to the tender package to include the doors at the community center.
Okay, if we think we can get more competitive pricing on that, that's what I would support. But anyway, I'm interested to hear if there's any other comments.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Mr. Manhire.
Mr. Chair, just as a heads up, the company was supplied us with the same price as they supplied for Town Hall Phase 2. And just to bear in mind that that was kind of pre-COVID prices. I'm not sure what's happened to the price of these kinds of systems and door hardware, but I do know that metal, as an example, anything that includes metal is approximately 30% higher than it was pre-COVID.
Councillor Alford.
notwithstanding Councillor McGuire's comments, it would seem to me to make more sense than throwing out the system we currently have in place because it's reasonably new, that's in Town Hall without the phase 3 being done, to look for more competitive pricing when I'm sure we paid some money to have the system that we have. So it makes more sense to me to marry that all together. And I would support your option 1 to see if we can't get some better pricing, but if that's also the same system that'll be in phase 3 of Town Hall and the community center and what's currently in place, that seems to me to be a reasonable way to go.
Do my colleagues agree with Councillor Alford's assessment that recommendation Mr. Manhuyer's put forward, linking it into phase 3 and the current system and building on that as recommended? I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up. Is there still some confusion or any other questions before? Go ahead, Mr. Manhuyer.
Sorry, just to clarify, is council suggesting option 2 then to include it as part of the phase 3 tender for, no? So option 1? Hello?
I think that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
Mayor Panko.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine us going with a different system for phase 3 than we're currently employing through the rest of the municipal complex. And from a staffing management standpoint and practicality standpoint, it likely makes sense to have the Memorial Community Center Youth Arena utilizing the same system. I mean, I don't know if there's any cost savings in waiting and going out, but if we're going to go over for tender for phase 3, we'd almost want to be prepared to overhaul the entire system, which has only been in here for a year anyway. So I'll support option 1 and with direction to staff to work with the supplier to bring in the project within budget.
I'm seeing nodding heads.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Morris, please.
Yeah, so perhaps I can offer a perspective. So on phase 3 of Town Hall, we're going to spec the same fob system as we currently have in phase 1 and 2, right? We need a consistent system in Town Hall. So on that basis, we felt an option would be to, as Mr. Manhuyer indicated, also include the Memorial Community Center to purchase the same system that we have presently at Town Hall. So really, there's a trade-off. We either negotiate with the supplier in an uncompetitive atmosphere, or we include it in the tender for Town Hall phase 3 in a competitive environment. The fundamental difference is if we go competitive, if we incorporate it into the tender for phase 3, there will be a general contractor that will want to make a couple points profit on the purchase. So the decision really is, do we purchase it through the general contractor for phase 3 in a competitive environment, or do we go with the sole source and negotiate something that we think is a reasonable deal?
And what are your recommendations?
Well, I think that the recommendation from Mr. Manhuyer is to negotiate with the supplier. We think our budget was 50,000. We felt back a year ago that was the value of the system. We have a quote for 58. So the direction Mr. Manhuyer is looking for is, will you authorize him to negotiate something that comes within the $50,000 budget envelope and go ahead and purchase it, if we can purchase it within the budget?
And I'm seeing everybody nodding and thumbs up. Thank you. That helps clarify that. So we're moving on to 8.5, hosted integration parking ticket and permit management system report. Deputy Clerk Bennett is going to walk us through this.
Good evening. Tonight I'm here to present report 2021-140. And this is a report to seek council support to award an RFP that was issued for a hosted integrated parking ticket and permit management system. In light, the system will issue tickets, as well as a member may be able to purchase a permit online through their platform. The platform will improve efficiency and effectiveness of our parking management program, as well as, it'll alleviate a lot of the administrative tasks on staff because it'll be all done electronically. The system also has a license plate recognition system built into it so that when they are issuing tickets, it's easier to manage the enforcement of 2-hour parking provisions in our downtown core. When we went out to RFP, we received three RFPs from ACO, GTECHNA, Hotspot, and Operations Commander. The recommendation tonight is to award the RFP to Operations Commander. As noted in our report, Operations Commander comes with great references from the town of Perth, town of Parry Sound, and city of Dryden. And they have 20 years experience of supplying parking management and security platforms across North America. Something to note is it is a local company. They come from Carleton Place, Ontario. So tonight we're seeking council support to move ahead with this RFP and implement the new system for parking management.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Deputy Clerk Bennett. I think this shows real excellent value for money. The maintenance fee is incredible for the product we're getting. And I really look forward to seeing this in place. I think it's going to streamline a lot of stuff for our bylaw officers. So thank you for all the work that went into this.
Thank you.
And Councillor Alford.
And I'll just add that the DBA has long advocated for consistent enforcement of certainly downtown, and they will be very happy to hear this, Nadine. So thank you for all the work on this particular one.
If I may, I can't open the report and follow the agenda. I'm not that talented, but if I recall when I read it, it also has a data package that comes with this that we can actually see where there might be hot spots, or we can actually generate data out of the report, out of this mechanism as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. So I like that feature as well. So I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, thumbs up. Thank you very much. And don't go too far away, Nadine. 8.6 is Louis Riel Day. And a couple of weeks ago, we received a letter, I think, from the Ontario Métis Association and requesting recognition for Louis Riel Day on November 16th. And I know we forwarded it to our Racism and Discrimination Task Force, and they supported it. Would you like to speak to this as well, Ms. Bennett?
Actually, you did a great job, Chair McKenna. Certainly, yes, this was fully supported by our Racism and Discrimination Task Force. And I should note, following the report, I had a call from another member of the Métis Council who also mentioned that they would like to attend if council is supportive of flag raising here. So certainly the recommendation from the Racism and Discrimination Task Force is to proceed and raise the flag for Louis Riel Day.
Okay, and what do my colleagues think about all of this? I'm seeing some thumbs up all around. So that's, you've got the full support of Cal to proceed and reach out to our Métis friends and invite them on that day when it is set, I think the 16th. And so.
Perfect. So we'll bring forward a resolution to the next meeting of council because this will follow our flag policy, and a resolution or proclamation is required. So we'll do that next Monday, and then the flag will be raised on Tuesday.
Great, thank you. Oh, Councillor Alford.
Okay.
You were fine. Don't touch it.
No, can whoever is chiming in, like it's making it hard for the rest of us to hear, can you turn it off or mute yourself or something?
I think, Nadine, if you go to mute, I don't know why, you might be the source.
Sorry about that. I'll make sure.
Thank you. It's a harp. All right. We're moving right along to the award of tender and the purchase of a single axle snowplow. Mr. McMunn, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do my best to keep things moving along here tonight. So this report this evening is an award of contract for a single axle fully outfitted snowplow for the Public Works Department. This purchase was approved in the 2021 capital budget, and I'm pleased to say that we received 2 bids for the outfitted snowplow, and the least expensive of the 2 bids came in at the price of $264,589.49 plus HST. So when we add our net HST 1.76%, we're just shy of 270,000. So there'll be a surplus of approximately 15,000 in that capital budget for this expenditure. I'll leave it at that. This will, I guess, modernize the Public Works roads component of what we do, in so much that this will be a new plow truck for the department, replacing a 1992 Champion grader that we've historically used in town. So this piece of equipment will be much more versatile for operators in town to navigate around towns. I feel it will be a much safer operation for the operators as they navigate through town. And they're quite excited to get this piece of equipment ordered. And on that note, we have a commitment from ELP Inc. to take delivery for this piece of equipment next October. So that'll put us in a good position for that following winter season. Through the chair, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, great. And as everyone knows, Paul, and I know you've heard many, many times that Smith Falls has the best plowed streets in Eastern Ontario. And this is just going to continue that tradition, and great to have for next year, but keep up the good work.
Mayor Panko?
Yeah, thanks, Director McMahon. And I think we started phasing out the graders probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I think traditionally the town probably would have primarily employed graders for grading and sand trucks for sanding. And so obviously this combination helps us save time and cover routes quicker, more efficiently. But Director McMahon, do we see, I think in the report it indicates you plan on retiring the other grader within, I guess, in the near future. So it's anticipated that the plow truck, single axle plow trucks can do just as good a job in removing snow as what the graders were doing or have been doing in the past.
Yeah, through the chair. Yes, that's how I would anticipate it. Now, having said that, I know there are municipalities such as Brockville and some of the larger centers, I would presume, are kind of along the same line, where they do employ rented graders from the likes of, say, the Tapulary Construction for winter control operations. But those graders wouldn't necessarily go out for every winter event. They would only be dispatched for certain heavy snow events where they let snow accumulate on some of the local roads around town. Perhaps maybe those roads get in a snowpack condition. The graders do a very effective job at peeling that snow and build up off those roads. But like I say, the city of Rockville geographically is much bigger than Smith Falls. So they would need on occasion to deploy the grader fleet. And I think they have maybe perhaps about 3 graders on standby, but they're only dispatched for those larger snow events, which to Councillor Brennan's point, I think if what you're saying is true, Councillor Brennan, that the streets in town are in good condition in the wintertime, then I can't see replacing graders with single axle fully outfitted plows would be a detriment that way. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. So I saw council's support, Cow's support for the purchase. So well done and thank you. And again, don't go anywhere. 8.8, is the amendments to the parking bylaw report. Mr. McMahon, back to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the committee of the whole meeting on October 25th, I brought a number of amendments, or proposed amendments to the parking bylaw for consideration by the committee members. Generally speaking, the committee was in favor of amendments to Schedule B, albeit they weren't necessarily in favor of the proposed amendments to Schedule G, which speaks to restricted parking during winter months. So I guess along the same timeline that we have the winter parking restriction in place. So we went back and looked at that, and Ogden Avenue, for instance, is currently has a parking restriction on the east side of Ogden Avenue. Whereas previously in the report, we noted that we were looking for a full parking restriction on both sides of the road. So that is not the case. It currently is restricted on the current east side of Ogden Avenue. So in looking at it, we felt that, albeit we would like to monitor over the course of this winter season, we do feel as though it is still, there are still some impedances on that particular stretch of roadway that makes it difficult for winter control operations. However, we feel that you know, we can make do for now, and if things get worse, then we perhaps maybe at a later date be coming back to this committee for further consideration to fully restrict parking on Ogden. And then with respect to Aberdeen, just give me a second here, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we were Public Works reevaluated the winter control operations on Aberdeen Avenue and are of the opinion that the concerns could be mitigated by not necessarily proposing to restrict parking on both sides of the street. We would simply be asking for a restriction on the west side only from November 15th to March 31st. So that was a compromise that we, from operational perspective, we felt that would work. So not asking for both sides, just one side in particular would alleviate some of the concerns from operational staff. So that's about it, considering that we at the previous October 25th meeting, the general consensus was that committee members were in favor of Schedule B. I guess it'd be important to note that there were a number of emails that were distributed over the last day or so with respect to the schedule change for Kent Street. Previously, we were looking at restricting parking on the south side of the street between Sussex Street and Running Avenue. Currently on the north side, there is currently restricted parking. So in essence, if we restricted parking on the south side, that would mean that there would be no parking on the street whatsoever. Currently the situation, and I did distribute an email to CAO Morris and I believe Your Worship, the Mayor, this afternoon, just taking a Google snapshot of the street in itself from Street View. And I did consult with Vanessa Bernicky, our engineering technologist in the office. She's kind of my local historian here in the department. And Vanessa brought up a good point in so much that the issue on Kent Street is with respect to the proximity of driveways beside each other. It doesn't really afford proper parking on the south side of the road, or the north side for that matter, but it's already restricted anyways. But on the south side in particular, I would guess there'd be maybe perhaps 6 meters or less between adjacent driveways. And the current parking bylaw suggests that you have to, that you would be in violation of the bylaw if you park closer than 1.5 meters to the edge of the driveway. So you subtract 1.5 times 2, so that accounts for either end. That would really only leave you about 3 meters to be properly parked between driveways. Now that will accommodate a small vehicle, but not a larger sedan or a truck. So that all being said, if we were not to do anything there is I guess an imposition of people parking in contravention of the bylaw. However, it's strictly complaint driven. I don't believe bylaw and or the police service is out checking for that kind of stuff. We would respond based on resident complaints. So I'll leave it at that for council to date the 10th Street. However, at the previous meeting, there was, I believe, general consensus that Schedule B was okay at the particular time. So I'll take any questions through the chair.
Thank you. And we have heard from the residents of Kent Street. So I'll see if there's any comments or questions from my colleagues. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Director McMunn. Looking at Kent Street, there's a lot of houses on it, and to take parking off the street completely, I think would be too much. Ogden and I'm getting a blank, but the other ones we knew if we took out one lane of parking, there would be no parking on the street. And Kent's a similar situation. Are there any other streets in this schedule that would have no parking on the street after it's updated?
Not that I believe, based on what I have in front of me here right now.
So for me, Kent Street's the same as Ogden, and I don't support taking away the parking at this time.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Alford.
I just want to confirm that I understand what Director McMunn said is that currently, whether we go ahead with removing the parking from Kent or not, that most people parking there would be in contravention of the existing bylaw. Is that what you were trying to relay to us?
Yeah, so sorry if I didn't articulate that very well.
No, I did. I just want to make sure I understand. So even if we leave the parking there, a neighbor could complain and they would be found in contravention of the existing bylaw.
Yes, in so much that they would encroach closer than that 1.5 meters that is, I guess, required to properly park. So, and what that all means is it just makes it super tight, if you will, for anybody accessing or trying to get out of their driveway, when you may perhaps just have the width of your driveway and no room on either side, because vehicles are, I guess, maybe trying to shoehorn themselves in there, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. McMunn.
The only thing I would maybe perhaps add is, I mean, this is a local street and presumably it's residents of the street that are parking there. I wouldn't suspect it was anybody else from around town. I think that would be a fair assumption. So perhaps, you know, I think realistically in local neighborhoods, people, everybody knows each other and they try to get along and they try to make concessions here or there if there's issues, and to afford everybody the same courtesy of easily getting in and out of your driveway. But to your point, Councillor Alfred, it is technically those that park there closer than 1.5 meters to driveways would be in contravention of the bylaw.
Yes, Mayor Panko.
Yeah, no, I support the recommendation that obviously with the exclusion of Kent Street. I mean, practically speaking, I mean, if the lots are narrow, we can't change that. There's no parking on Chambers, just around the corner. It just makes it a very challenging area to accommodate parking needs. And I wouldn't suggest, I guess, that we change the bylaw that would obviously impact that area. I think hopefully everyone who lives along there can make it work, and we don't have too many problems to navigate through. But it's one of those situations. It's we don't have a toolbox to work with this one. It just, our options are too limited, and we'll accept it the way it is.
So I'm hearing support or some nodding to keep the current situation of parking on one side of Kent Street. And even though we know that, and the neighbors will work out their parking issues, and as need be, bylaw will step in as they always do. So I'm not hearing any objection to that. Okay. And the rest of your schedule will proceed as recommended. Correct? Is that enough feedback for you, Mr. McMahon?
Yes, I believe I've got my my marching orders on that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So we'll move along to Bellamy Farm Phase 2, 8.9, and Mr. Grenke. I haven't seen you all night.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. The first report I'm presenting this evening are essentially housekeeping items related to the Bellamy Farms Phase 2 subdivisions, and there's a couple of recommendations in this report. At this point, the developers are working through their conditions of draft approval. One of those conditions is zoning compliance, which the developers are seeking to address through the lifting of the holding provision. And looking ahead to next year, when we'll likely have a significant volume of site plan applications to accommodate townhouse blocks, our second recommendation relating to this file involves an amendment to the town site plan control bylaw. So with respect to the holding zone, just a brief bit of history. This was put in place around 2013 for all of the Bellamy Farm lands, less the first phase, since the traffic study done at the time identified the need for further investigation to determine infrastructure needs, including the potential for connecting Ferrero to either Broadview through what is now Staples or to Highway 15. Through the transportation planning process undertaken by the former Director of Public Works and the developer, a need was not identified for a connection to Lombard Street, or at least not one that was directly dependent on and tied to the subdivision. And instead, they were focusing on the second necessary connection would be focused on Broadview Avenue, which is currently a gravel rural cross-section road, but proposed to be upgraded to a collector status. The traffic study and the addendums undertaken in support of the subdivision phases that are draft approved are of the opinion that the site traffic would have an acceptable impact on the level of service and that no modifications to offsite intersections would be required. So the details of this of the Broadview upgrade, which of course is still important as a secondary means of emergency access, those details will be administered through the upcoming subdivision agreement. However, based on the information received, reviewed, and accepted by the Public Works Department, we're of the opinion that Council could consider a bylaw to lift the holding provision, and we recommend that be done in two stages. The first stage would be that the bylaw would take effect for a single block close to the Staples Boulevard to allow for the construction of a model home, and that's accommodated in the draft approval conditions, and that Parkview is looking to do very soon. And then the bylaw can be adopted but take effect for the remainder of the subdivision lands upon the final approval. So when we're ready to register, when the conditions are all fulfilled, the rest of the conditions are all fulfilled. The second recommendation arising from this report is not a condition of draft approval, but is presented to accommodate faster review and approval processes for site plans. Earlier this year, we adopted a new site plan control bylaw delegating approval authority to staff for minor site plans, and the bylaw defined what is a minor site plan. At this time, we're recommending modifying the definition of minor to include townhouse developments that are planned for in a subdivision through a subdivision process. And that the rationale for that is much of the site and neighborhood conditions would have already been planned for through the subdivision, and the site plan for these townhouses would focus on aligning site grading and other specific details. So that would be a bylaw amendment. It wouldn't be just pertaining to the subdivision. It would apply to any future subdivisions as well. However, the procedural aspect that we're looking at was highlighted at this time, given what we expect will be several dozen applications that will be made to the town in coming months for site plan approval for the blocks. So at this point, we're seeking council's direction on these two items, and then in the coming weeks, additional aspects of the Bellamy Farms Phase 2 will be brought forward as they continue to clear conditions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Grenke. Is the way you've listed the recommendation is one, and then the other does it matter which order council takes it in? Did you do that deliberately?
It does not matter. They're just presented together for ease of administration, but they are independent of each other.
That's fine. Thank you. So looking at that first one, that actually council delegate the authority to staff for site plan applications to accommodate townhouses. Any comments or suggestions on that or thoughts? Mayor Panko.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. These are, we all know in phase one, these are all sort of repetitive types of homes. There may be some differences in the features, but essentially structurally they are, if you got an end unit on one, it's going to be very similar to an end unit on another. So I've certain confidence in our staff to manage this effectively for the benefit of everyone.
Does that council agree with that observation? We do. Yes, thank you. So you've got, we accept your recommendation number 1 for delegation of approval to staff. And then number 2 is around the bylaw to lift the holding provision on the lands. Any comments or questions on that? Again, it's pretty standard. We're all comfortable. There's a lot of thumbs up. You've got, you're 2 for 2, Mr. Grenke. Thank you. And thank you for the report. Okay, getting back. Sorry, I've just lost my agenda. I realize that you only do this every 6 months, and I had a system 6 months ago, and I've forgotten. Now I remembered what it was, though. So enough of that. There we go. You're very patient. There we go. So now, oh, Mr. Grenke's not gone yet. 8.10 is the Bellamy Farms Semur site plan report. And again, Mr. Grenke, would you summarize that for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second report I'm presenting this evening is for a residential site plan on Ferrero, which is described as Block 1 of the original Phase 1 of the Bellamy Farm approval. This 3.2 acre block was planned throughout the process for higher density residential development and zoned accordingly. So the property has been sold to the Semur Group, who put forward a proposal for a 51 unit residential development that will be in 3 buildings of 17 units each. And these will be 2 and 3 bedroom units and for rental accommodations. As noted in the report, one aspect of the complexity of this site relates to the planning for the stormwater management for the Phase 2 Bellamy Farms, and certainly I credit the work of the engineers and public works staff and the engineers working on behalf of the town, which have satisfied the Public Works Department for the purposes of site plan review. So we will be looking at an easement there. I'd also like to acknowledge the work the developers have done on the site to develop an attractive development that works with the Cataraqui Trail, includes green spaces, including a significant amount of tree planting, especially around the fringes of the site, and accommodates screening as best as reasonably possible from the rear yards of the development. So there will be a number of there will be sidewalks, walkways throughout the site. The developers are proposing bike racks as well, and ultimately the project that's presented to council was reviewed carefully by a number of different departments, and at this point, staff are recommending that council give approval to the site plan and give direction for us to complete and execute a site plan agreement with the developers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? I'm seeing some thumbs up around the table. So that Council Cow is supportive of your recommendation, Mr. Grenke. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're down to 8.11 and the transfer payment agreement with the ministry. Mr. Manhire, you're going to mention that, and I think we just got a tweak to that one today, but I'll leave it over to you, Mr. Manhire.
So this is a good news story. This grant that the town has received on COVID resilience infrastructure stream for $175,020. And this agreement, this TPA, the transfer payment agreement, just allows the town to receive the funds from the ministry.
Questions or comments? Thumbs up from everyone. We're certainly supportive of the recommendation that the mayor and clerk enter into that agreement. Thank you. Mr. Morris, maybe I spoke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to mention we have a special council meeting following this meeting to approve it. We're on a very aggressive timetable to get the TPA submitted. And so that's the reason we have a special council meeting following this discussion tonight.
And I'm very excited about that meeting. Thank you. We're on to adjournment. Now, is there any other, yes, Councillor Dwyer, were you going to comment on?
No, I was moving for adjournment
Okay.
eagerly.
Yes, I see that. So that the committee adjourn its proceedings at 6:31 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, second by Councillor Brannan. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're going to take 5 minutes in between meetings or less.